Hello, I'm Tim Harris. This is Julie Harris, and this is Real Estate Coaching Radio.
That's right. So make sure that you hit the subscribe button so you won't miss any future episodes. Thanks again for popping by. Hit that like button, and don't forget to leave your comments and questions so we can get right back with you.
We will. Thank you for continuing to make our podcast, Real Estate Coaching Radio, the #1 listened to podcast for real estate professionals in at least the United States. And let us know what you think about this video. Leave your comments below. Thank you.
This week we've been focused on price reductions, or frankly how to price the property correctly in the first place, and especially when going to visit a expired listing, how to get the price correct so that it does sell the second or third or fourth time, as is sometimes the case.
That's right.
So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to share with you a system that we teach in Premier Coaching. Well, this isn't the actual system. This is more of an overview of the system because we only have you guys for 30 minutes on this podcast. And if you want the real drill down, obviously it's in Premier Coaching. But what we're doing is we're going to share with you a concept of how to have conversations before the conversations, the call before the call.
Yes, you might call it the art of the price reduction.
That's right. Because it is a system. Because just at the bottom, at the end of the day, if you just hit a seller one day with, you need to lower your price, you're probably going to get fired. The seller might not even lower the price, even if it's in their best interest to lower the price, just out of spite because of the way you asked, or frankly, because you're the one that told them to overprice it in the first place.
Or more than likely, you're not even going to ask in the first place because you're so wigged out about having to.
Exactly.
Okay, so what to do before you ask for a price reduction. And tomorrow we're going to sprinkle some scripts upon you so that you will be ready after you listen to what we're doing today. So what to do before you ask. So let's assume that you have a listing or listings that are sitting on the market. If you don't yet, you will. You're gearing up to ask your seller to reduce the price. Well, even the most experienced and skilled realtors and brokers don't like making those calls. You are not alone. It's normal to not like those calls.
For sure, making price reduction calls were the hardest thing from being a listing agent.
Agreed.
Yeah, I mean, because you had to be ready. Really, if I just think about it now, I'm getting anxiety. I'm starting to stutter. Really.
I know, and you did tons of them.
I know, I did.
Yeah.
Well, at the end of the day, you're going to hear things like, if you don't essentially follow the system, and you guys can see where the roots of the system came in, us having to actually sell real estate and then teaching to all of our coaching clients for the last 20 years. But yeah, you're going to hear things like, I'll lower the price if you do this. This is the seller saying it to you. Or what have you done for me lately? Or if you do 14 more open houses, or this or that or the other thing, right?
Or why aren't you showing it more frequently?
Exactly. Which, by the way, the answer to that, Mr. And Julie wants me to hold off on all the scripts till tomorrow, but I will show her this.
You can do that one.
Okay, I'll do this one. All right. So, Mr. Seller, that is a great question. I appreciate you asking. And the truth is that I might not be the agent that's showing your property, but I am the reason it's getting shown. And let me explain why. And then you'd go into the explanation of what you're doing to get the property sold.
But you have to be ready to field that, right?
Yeah. Well, so the moral of the story here isn't it? You have to be working the seller into the price adjustment conversation, not just springing it on them. So it's a new concept for a lot of you, but that's really the way it's supposed to work in order to make it so that when it does come time to have the actual meat and potatoes conversation about repositioning the house on the market to correctly reflect the buyer's expectation, there's another script for you. In other words, lower the price. They're prepared for it emotionally, and they're not going to overreact, and they've also essentially worked out all their anxiety. This is the system that we're going to be explaining today in great detail as much as we can in 30 minutes. And then again, tomorrow is all about the scripts. If you want the details, if you want the notes that Julie's going to be sharing with all of you, make sure you scroll down. The notes are in today's show description, along with a link to join Premier Coaching. It's the next natural step for all of you. You guys hear us talking about it every single day. A lot of you are Premier Coaching members. You rant and rave about it. It is the nation's #1 selling coaching program. So do consider scrolling down and joining Premier Coaching. And yes, you can join Premier Coaching right now for free. So go ahead and take advantage of that offer. This is the perfect time of year. Every time of year is the perfect time of year. But now especially as we enter this new phase of this real estate adjustment where we're going to have to really focus on price adjustments.
So again, the purpose of today's podcast is to help you prepare for the big ask and actually achieve a meaningful price adjustment. On tomorrow's podcast, we're going to share some proven scripts, conversation outlines, so you'll know what to say and how to say it. And of course, as Tim mentioned, you get a lot more of this sort of thing when you are a Premier Coaching member. So before you go asking for a reduction or a price improvement, there are things to say to your seller and things not to say to your seller. Let's start with some quick things not to say. Point number 1, do not bring up the price on every call you have with the seller. The #1 complaint from expired sellers in today's shifting market is The only time I heard from my agent was to beat me down on price or to ask me to reduce price. Sellers want to know what you're doing for them before they're willing to budge on their listing price. So don't make every communication, every text, every time you talk to them all about price. You will either not get a price reduction or get a meaningless price reduction.
Well, you have to understand from the seller's perspective, what are the things that cause people the most stress? And there's lots of studies that have been done on this, like birth, death, divorce.
And selling your house.
And selling your house, right? Anything to do with money, right? So if you are involved in a transaction that is requiring the seller to experience a whole bunch of anxiety that they normally, or that they have essentially designed their lives around never experiencing. You're asking them to make big financial decisions, and that for them feel very, it's triggering fight or flight. And if you don't do it correctly, they're going to go into fight mode. That is really the essence of what Julie's trying to teach all of you guys to understand. So be super clear that just because you're used to thinking about price and you're used to thinking about these types of things, the seller is not. And most sellers, most humans have designed their entire lives around never having meaningful conversations about money. Okay?
That's right. And they're already stressed out. Just moving at all, regardless of what price you're getting, is stressful. You guys if you haven't done it lately, you will understand that the next time you move. All right, point number 2 of what not to say or do, and we've said this on every pricing podcast, do not use language like cut, slash, or reduce. Replace with words like improve, adjust, or modify with regards to price.
Well, that's when you're talking to a seller, and after you do reposition the house on the market, after you do lower the price, you don't advertise that the price was lowered. Don't do it. Don't make it sound like the house is on sale.
Exactly.
And be careful about this. Think through it. What's the reaction the market going to have when they see the price is lowered? I see agents making that huge mistake all the time.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Inexpensive price reducers, right? Or I'm sorry, inexperienced. Yes. Okay, number 3, do not ignore the market conditions and assume that every listing you take will instantly sell with multiple offers for whatever price you put on it. Maybe the average days on the market for a listing like yours have actually risen to 60 days on the market, but you didn't realize it. Maybe the average list to sell price ratio isn't 105% anymore. It's dropped to maybe 97%. So that, quote, lowball offer wasn't actually a lowball at all. So know your facts on each individual listing. Maybe you now have 5 homes you're competing with, but you assumed that there were none and it would be a feeding frenzy. So review what's going on weekly for all of your active listings. They're not all going to act the same way.
And when communicating that type of information, the analytical stuff to the seller, and we do teach you guys how to do this in the coaching program, is when you're communicating with the seller every single week, do give them an updated CMA on a regular basis so they can actually see the activity. And frankly, so you're forced to see it as well. And the seller doesn't ping you out of the blue and surprise you with more marketed information than you actually have. But what Julie's, in that last point, which she's hoping you understand, is that you want to under-promise and over-deliver. So if the days in the market is going to be, let's say a stretch to 60 or 90 days for a particular type of house in your market, and there's plenty of properties like that, you don't necessarily want it. You want to be super careful that you're not promising you're going to sell it in 30 days, whatever the overall market's average is. And if anything, you want to hedge towards the longer days in the market so that they are emotionally prepared for the house to not sell right away. If you do not emotionally prepare for them to sell the house, for the house to sit on the market, or sit on the market for longer than what they expected, what's going to happen is when you do call them up for that price adjustment call, they're going to say no because they're going to feel like you lied to them. Even, again, a second time I've said it today, but it's true, even if it's not in their best interest not to lower the price, they'll do it, again, out of spite.
They'll make it your fault. They will.
They will. And they won't even necessarily tell you. They'll be passive-aggressive about it.
That is true. And the other thing to watch is surrounding your individual listings, is inventory going up or going down or staying the same? And same with new construction. So we'll talk about some of this stuff. Okay, what can you do and what conversations should you have prior to asking for a price reduction from your seller or sellers? Remember, your seller is wondering, what have you done for me lately? Don't let them wonder for too long. You might get fired or the listing could expire on you. The object of the game, again, is to be the listing agent when it actually sells. So what should you do? And again, you get a lot more of this in Premier Coaching. I'm not going to deep dive into the 12-week communication plan, but this next point is based on that. Communicate with all sellers at least once per week using our 12-week seller communication plan that you get in Premier Coaching. For example, according to the plan, you will update your seller each week with at least the following, and there's more to it, of course. How many showings you've had this week and how many total showings they've had since you listed the home. What was the feedback after each showing? Suggest remedies to improve any issues. Now, we realize that for a long time, the feedback was choose an offer. If that's not the feedback you're getting, you need to find out why you don't have offers to choose from. Number of inquiries, saves, and downloads from your online media, conversations you've had in person via text or email regarding their listings with both buyer prospects as well as buyer's agents. What were your open house results? When is your next open house scheduled? Which homes have sold that you used to be competing with? And how many days did those homes take to sell? Why did those homes sell versus your listing? Was it related to the feedback that you're getting? Or was it just a more popular floor plan or a better location or a better view? Why did the competition sell versus your listing? These are all conversations to have with a seller, showing that you are paying attention and that you're taking action.
So advanced coaching for those of you with teams, you can delegate the actual processing of all this information and the actual sending to the seller, but you cannot and should not delegate the actual calling, the weekly calling. Because again, they will build these psychological, walls around the relationship with you. You will lose the listing. You won't get price reductions. You won't get referrals. You've got to be staying in front of your sellers at all times. You have to, especially when they're going through stress like this, to hide out from them or to bury yourself inside some, delegated staff system is going to result in you not winning. This market is not like the old market. You're going to have to be more professional and more upfront and be far more in communication with all of your clients.
That's right. And just because they're getting showing time feedback doesn't mean that they're reading it, doesn't mean they're understanding it. And if they're reading stuff that you haven't read, that can be kind of a black hole as well. I'll give you a funny example, though, from a coaching client in California. And I felt so bad for her because this was her very first listing. She kept getting feedback that said, shows like a zoo, smells like a zoo. Okay. And she just thought, oh, that's just realtors being obnoxious. Okay. Until she then went to what she thought was a vacant house. Turns out the seller had an emotional support pony that was living inside the house. And there was maybe some, pony poo that had to be remedied. That would be feedback to take care of, wouldn't it? Okay, so you just never know what's lurking in showing time.
Well, I mean, we've had others that are far grosser or more hilarious than that.
Just trying to lighten the mood with the
the
price
blood-stained
reductions.
house and
exactly
the house we listed that turns out there was a hidden S&M room in the basement that we didn't know about that one of the buyer's agents found during a showing and the seller never told us.
See, I was trying to keep it clean.
Yeah, I know you were.
I had to give them all the stories. Okay. But yes, you need to be monitoring. The name of the game here is don't let your sellers know more about what's going on than you do. That's bad. Okay, number 2, yes, you should be holding open houses. 9 out of 10 sellers expect you to do this. They're watching Bravo TV and HGTV nonstop, and they are a great lead generator for you in a market starved for listings. Yes, you might actually sell the home yourself via an open house. I'm hearing that more and more in today's inventory-starved market than I've ever heard in our whole coaching or real estate selling careers.
Well, it's because buyers have given up. Guys, I'm not running to offend any of you, but buyers have a lot of times given up on buyers agents,
yes,
especially those that only know how to find their inventory on the MLS. We did a podcast 2 weeks ago about the dozens of different ways you can find homes for sale with links to these various websites of properties that are for sale that are not in the MLS. Go and listen to that one. I think it was last week's. But yeah, the buyers are wise enough, especially more experienced, more upper end buyers. They go directly to the sellers because they want information on the house and they want to buy the house. It's not because they're trying to get the seller or the listing agent to kick in commission or any of these other things.
No, they're just desperate to find a house.
They just want to buy a house.
Well, and I'll tell you another weird phenomenon of a low inventory market with regards to open houses is I've had many different circumstances where our coaching clients have said, they had buyers that came into their open houses that were working with other agents, but those agents were unwilling to show them anything until the house they had for sale
I've heard that.
actually closed. And most of these cases, they were already pending. So they weren't really contingent on home sale. They were contingent on home closing. And those are viable buyers that are probably 2 weeks away from victory that should be writing on property. So that's an interesting little phenomenon.
Well, it's because the buyer's agents are thinking that the sellers in that marketplace won't take home sale contingencies.
Yeah, so why bother showing it?
But, these are inexperienced listing agents who are now inexperienced buyer's agents who are going to end up losing the up leg on that list. That seller that they have was now becoming a buyer. That buyer is going to buy either directly from the listing agent or walk into new construction.
That's right. I mean, they're practically homeless. Why isn't their agent being more proactive?
It's ridiculous.
It is. So don't let that happen to you. All right, number 3, if your pictures are seasonal, update them. If it's autumn and your pictures are of spring of your listing, it automatically looks outdated. Change your wording in the description and keep things looking and sounding fresh. I suppose that's an advantage to our Florida, Texas, and California clients because it all basically looks the same.
By the way, ChatGPT really does do a great job writing property descriptions.
Yes.
It's ridiculous.
Absolutely. Should definitely be doing that. Okay, number 4, refer to our 11 ways to sell your listings fast, which we just finished that podcast series, and add some perks to that listing. Make sure you discuss with your seller first and do a new seller's net sheet. Give it 2 weeks after you've promoted the perks before you talk about price. So let's say that you put a buyer side commission bonus on it, or maybe you add the seller is going to contribute to closing costs. Let that percolate for a couple of weekends before you go after price again, or in the first place. Okay, number 5, let your database know about your new listing and ask them who they know who would love to live in that neighborhood. Make sure your listing client knows that you've done this. When you guys wonder how it is that there are so many things that look like pocket listings, it's because agents do this. Because they know you're looking for something that sounds like this, and then I make a call like that, and I be a matchmaker for you and put those deals together.
Well, that's the kind of, if you're
proactive.
If you're in that agent's database and you're getting a call and they're letting you know about a new listing, well, it turns out that person just discovered that they're getting relocated,
Yes.
to wherever, and guess who's going to get the listing? It's just
Exactly.
about being proactive. That again, Julie and I always lean back into the same thing. In a world where everyone wants to hide behind WhatsApp and Facebook, and that's Julie's next point. In a world where everyone wants to drip on people and SMS people and text people, the real advantage is going to be having direct, real conversation. I know that sounds counterintuitive because, gosh knows I love text. But the reality of it is if you really want to have a real, I'll give you an example. I have a friend that we do business with frequently. When I text him, he always calls me back. He'll never, Rafi.
Yeah, I was thinking
He'll never call me back.
Always. And he calls you quickly back.
Never text me back. He always calls me back. And it makes a huge difference.
Absolutely.
It takes him, more time, but it leaves a lasting impression so much so I just told about 14,000 of you.
Yeah, well, and you also know that it's him when he calls and you always answer.
Yeah.
It's like that's the relationship you've worked out.
Well, because nobody else calls. Everybody else basically wants to do something
100%.
that's passive. So if you become proactive with your communication, which he does, then you're obviously going to have an advantage in the marketplace where everyone else is being passive.
Well, that's a huge point that I think you and I are used to talking about and living. But look at what Tim just said. When somebody texts you, call them. You're going to do more business.
Someone messages you in any way,
Call them.
Call them.
Yes, I know,
Yeah,
it seems so basic.
if you can, go see them. That gives you an unfair advantage. Be clear about that. Oh, it takes more time. It does. But you know what takes even more time? Posting pictures on social media and doing all these other passive things, hoping and praying that the real estate gods are going to sprinkle a lead on you. Where if you just start having direct conversations you want to know how to differentiate yourself in your marketplace, build your brand. If you want to, use that vernacular, it's being the agent who actually is making the phone calls, answering the questions, being of service to other people. It's not difficult.
It's also a lot more efficient and faster. People forget that dialing the phone is actually faster than fighting with your text autocorrect,
It's
right?
because they don't know what to say.
I know.
And it's because
We're working on that.
Well, they also get in their heads. Like, what are they going to think of me? I don't want to be rude. I don't want to interrupt them. They're going to think I'm desperate. All these little internal dialogues you guys have in your heads, they're making you broke. So just remember, you're here to be of service to other people as a real estate professional. And the best way for you to do that is have direct, meaningful, sometimes scripted conversations with prospective buyers and sellers. It's not difficult.
That's right. So speaking of which, number 6, post on your nextdoor.com/name of your neighborhood. If you don't know about that, just Google nextdoor.com and read up about it. Any community pages on Facebook or WhatsApp, and let your seller know that you've done this. Monitor for questions and comments on those entities. There are a surprising amount of deals happening on Nextdoor, which is just like a micro community for neighborhoods. So, don't be surprised if you get some fairly immediate response to that. I've had several coaching clients that have done deals last week just off of Nextdoor. Okay, number 7, door knock the neighborhood with a just listed flyer. I've been talking about Kristen Hawley lately. She's got a lot of business from door knocking around her listings in her neighborhoods. So door knock with a just listed flyer, asking each owner, here's where you have real conversations. Ask each owner you speak with whom they know who would love to move into this neighborhood. Let your seller know you did this. You'll probably take more listings as a result of your door knocking anyway, so don't skip this. Now, if you haven't done at least, and again, we give you more in Premier Coaching, but if you haven't done at least all 7 of these things, you shouldn't expect your seller to give you the reduction you're looking for. And they may even get combative with you when you ask. And if you do get anything out of them, it could be a micro reduction, which caused you all of that stress and didn't make a hill of beans difference.
So let's just foreshadow tomorrow's podcast, okay? So what you're going to do when you take the listing is when you take the listing and you have the paperwork signed, you're going to give the seller a complete home selling guide. This is when you're a Premier Coaching client. That's going to answer basically all the questions they might have now that the property is listed. And one of the things in there, quite a few of the things in there, are about adjusting the price if necessary. And so you're going to show them what the, essentially this is going to happen on this day and this week, this day and this week, this day and this week, this day and this week. It's laying out what the next 4 months is going to be like as they go through the process of selling their home with you. And in there is pre-scheduled conversations about repositioning the house on the market. What you don't want to do is spring on your sellers that it's time to lower the price. And you don't want to call the seller and just nag them about price. You need to be working into the conversation. And by the time you're actually going to ask them to reposition the house in the market to correctly reflect the buyer's expectations, they're already expecting it. Or in some cases, if you've done it really at a high level, they'll have already told you and maybe even messaged you and telling you what they want to lower the price to. That's really the best way to go about doing it. There's certain things we're going to show you guys tomorrow. I call it the call before the call.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the call before the call. We're going to talk about what to say. We're going to give you some, again, we only got 30 minutes, but we're going to give you different price adjustment scripts and all the rest of it. All of this is available on Premier Coaching. If you're not experiencing this in your marketplace, I promise you that you will. Why? Because a lot of the listings that are active now are going to be expiring because the agents who listed them are not getting the properties repositioned on the market to correctly reflect the buyer's expectations.
Right. Or they're going to get canceled. They're going to get fired by the seller because they made some of the mistakes we talked about at the top of this podcast.
Exactly. So you're going to see an enormous surge in opportunities with expired listings or withdrawn listings. By the way, in the show description below is a link to RedX. RedX is the only source that we suggest you guys use when you're finding expired phone numbers and contact information. So describe that as I clear my throat.
That's okay. So some of you do not call expireds because it's a forensics mission to find phone numbers. Instead, just simply use RedX and use the code RED. It's in the link description,
it's in the link.
right?
Just go down below.
But they're going to give you a daily list of what has expired based on your parameters. They're going to give you not just the address, but the seller's names, their phone numbers, how are you going to contact them, and some history on that listing. That saves you literally hours and hours and hours of research, which is why some of you aren't doing it. So now you have no excuse.
Use our scripts. Use RedX's data. Call the sellers, and obviously, honor the DNC list and all the rest of it. They help you do that. They help you to know which ones are on the DNC list, and then go at it. And that's going to be an opportunity for you to, frankly, some of you, if you've completed your real estate treasure map because you're Premier Coaching clients, you know that your magic number of listings, let's say, is 5 or maybe it's 7, depending on what your price point is. If you don't know what I'm talking about, the real estate treasure map is in the first level of Premier Coaching, which you get free access to when you join Premier Coaching. So when you complete the real estate treasure map, which is your fill-in-the-blank business plan, you're going to know what your real estate magic number is. Magic number is the number of listings you need at all times to meet or exceed all your personal and all your financial goals and obligations. So you could actually work over the next maybe 3 months to take 3, 4, 5, maybe even 10 listings, because you're going to see probably 20 or 30% increase in all markets in the number of expired listings, if not more in some cases.
Sure. I would say the more inventory we see, which is already starting to happen, the more expireds you're going to see. And the longer the days on the market, the more likely you are to see expireds and cancels. That's usually when an agent's gotten fired for whatever reason, and withdraws. Maybe they're taking a break, but we're seeing an increase of all of that. And it's a huge opportunity. There are people that, in most cases, have to sell. Almost every listing that I hear, well, even the buyer side's come to think of it, that I'm hearing from my elite coaching calls are people who are moving because of circumstance. They're not moving.
Explain what that means.
Okay, so relocation is a big one right now, especially as the month and quarter changes.
So they have to sell sellers.
They have to sell. Keeping their old house is not an option for them.
They're not want to sell. They're not. If pigs
they
fly,
are moving.
Right. They're going to move. Their situation is dictating they move. It's not a situation where they are choosing to do it out of, because they're just serial movers, right?
Right.
As people were in the previous market.
The FOMO movers.
The
yes.
FOMO movers,
That's right. The next one would be estate, probate, inheritance, something of that nature where, there are some heirs and they're not going to keep the house.
There's like 20 or 30 different reasons why sellers have to sell.
That's right. I mean, and even on the buy side, right? So the person who's selling because they're relocating, they are also a motivated buyer, because typically when you get relocated, you don't go rent if you do, it's for a month or so.
Right.
So you have some very motivated people. We also have a large amount of downsizing baby boomers who are all cash transactions. Both on the selling side, there's no low interest rate mortgage to break up with, and cash deals on the buyer side, because, remember, we have a record amount of equity in the country right now. We have record high credit scores. We have, lots of good things. I think the things that I read online lately, it's like agents are so focused on all the bad stuff, the negative stuff, and waiting for prices to come down, waiting for rates to come down. Stop that. There are lots of people who are really excited to be moving and who are highly motivated and really, really need your help. I mean, I look at our coaching clients that do the things we talked about on this podcast where they're really motivated. They do the door knocking. They do the posting on the neighborhood sites. They do the open houses. They do the open house process. They follow up. They have furiously fast lead follow-up. They are literally going from deal to deal to deal as matchmakers. When they put something in the MLS, it's more like one day on the market because they've already put the deal together, and it's going to close in 30 to 45 days. When you are proactive in a market like this, you get rewarded a lot faster.
Yeah. And listen to everything Julie just said. If you are finding yourself in an emotional quagmire, and you're going to create a financial quagmire. So a suggestion to you is, start purging. And we talked a lot about this as well. The things that you're allowing to have an influence on you. If you do not believe that your tomorrow is going to be massively better than your today, you will start locking in that your tomorrow will not be massively better than today by your lack of activity today. So you're not going to, well, I doubt if anyone listening to this podcast is of that mindset.
Especially not since they made it to the end of this podcast.
Right.
They're listening. They're paying attention. They're frosty.
Right. The people who listen to our podcast are the ones that are going to be part of the new generation of leaders in their marketplaces.
Mm-hmm. I believe that.
Because somebody who has a, negative mindset, let's just use that woo-woo term, or somebody who's not believing that, the best days in their careers are ahead of them, they don't listen to our podcast.
It's funny. It's like you just read my mind, because I was working on that article for Florida Association of Realtors, and they asked us to contribute some mindset points going into the new year. And I used that is that, if you believe that your best days are behind you, what kind of outlook is that versus your best days are ahead of you? Look at the difference just in that sentence, how your mindset and your outlook is. You've got to be putting deals together. I also said, your mantra needs to be, if it's meant to be, it's up to me. You make your own market. Stop waiting for the market to come to you. Those days are over.
Honestly, Julie, all these podcasts we've been doing over the last maybe 18 months, they're bringing me so much back to when you and I started selling real estate.
Me too.
This is what it feels like.
More of a normal type market. It's not normal to most of our listeners, but it was normal before, booms and crashes. And
when we were selling real estate, interest rates were basically just like they were now. It was a transitioning phase, just like it is now. It was going from a hot seller's market to a more normalized market, just like it is now. And that's when Julie and I sold 103 homes in our first year. And that was the start of our 10-year career, selling between 100 and 200 homes per year. So the reality of it is that we know from personal experience that you can actually have an unfair advantage in the marketplace if you're willing to do what you don't want to do and you don't want to do it at the highest level. Especially now, because so much of the old guard's not going to be willing to do what they don't want to do, and they don't want to do it at the highest level because maybe they don't know how, maybe they never learned, or maybe they're just burned out, tired, and don't want to take action. It does not matter. Your best days in real estate are ahead of you. The best opportunity in our industry for sure is ahead of us. If you don't believe me, Google what the word demographics means. Okay? That'll do it. So guys, in the meantime, have a fantastic day. We'll talk with you on the show tomorrow. And remember, tomorrow we're talking about scripts.
Hello, thank you for having watched this video. Please remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel.
That's right. And don't forget to hit that like button, leave your comments and questions below, and we will get right back with you.
Thank you for watching this video. And remember to watch the next one. You're going to love that one.